This is your log. Okay, we're going to dive into this a lot later on in this presentation, but if you look at the left side of this, columns A through F, that's just kind of the personal information of the claim, or excuse me, of the recordable. Case number, employee name, job title, month and date, because the year is in your upper right-hand corner there. Where the event occurred, and that can be either an address or a project name, you decide. And then a brief description of what happened. Because remember, you have an incident report that captures all the details. You just need some brief sentence fragment there in column F. We're going to spend a lot of time going through the details and the do's and the don'ts of columns G through 6. GHIJ, you're going to classify only one of those 4 boxes, check only one, classifying the case. We'll enter numbers if applicable in columns K and L. So that's the only 2 places you'll see a numerical entry. And then we're going to check only one box in columns 1 through 6. And most of the time it's column 1, which is an injury, but there are some what they call illnesses that are represented in columns 2 through 6. Okay. And this is your log. This is maintained throughout the year. Best practice. Don't wait to the end of the year to go back through all your incident reports and then try to populate this at the end of the year. Do this as you go. This is meant to also be a tool, a tool with your safety culture in identifying trends. If you look halfway through the year or 2 months in the year and you see a trend like 2 or 3 or 4 hand cuts, then we should be talking about, okay, how do we mitigate our exposure to cut hands, whether it's cut resistant gloves or policies, procedures. Don't want to dive into that too far, but this should be a tool to identify trends and to stop those injuries from happening. Okay, so this is your log, your OSHA 300 log. This is your summary. And if you look at the left side of that box there, or of this page, you're going to see the same letters and numbers that correspond to the right side of your log here. So at the very bottom, you're going to see page totals down here. That's all you're doing at the end of the year. Your summary is you're just totaling that page and entering those total numbers. Now, the Excel forms that Alex sent you that we'll review here later, these 2 pages are linked. So as you fill this out, again, throughout the year, this left side of this page auto-populates and you actually don't need a calculator to fill anything out. And I'll illustrate this later on. The right side of this, the box, is your establishment information and your employee information. The only 2 numbers you should chase down at the end of the year under employment information, which is your annual average number of employees and the total hours worked by all employees last year. So other than that, that box should, for the most part, stay the same. The only other one-off would be if you change the scope of work you do. So if you were a roofer and then decided that you wanted to focus more on doing siding, and that your NAICS code would change. You would report more hours in different risk classifications, and so that might change. But generally speaking, once a company is an electrical company or a plumbing company or a roofing company, that's what they stay. So your SIC, standard industrial classification, or your NAICS code stays the same. So again, the only 2 numbers you're chasing down before you post this would be your annual average number of employees and the total hours worked by all employees. And we'll dive into that in more detail as we get into this page. The requirements of this summary. So this is the public document. This page right here is what people will see. The require of that Form 300A, your summary, is that it must be posted by February 1st, and it must be posted until April 30th. So it needs to be, by posting, I mean literally, lick it and stick it. It should go on your wall. So you should print a copy of this off from your computer and post it at your place of business, as well as all those job trailers where you have job sites that are in play for more than that year. Okay. Most employers I work with leave this up all year round and they just switch it out every January, February. Okay. The requirements are this has to be posted by February 1st and needs to stay up until April 30th. You must keep both your log and your summary on file for at least 5 years. And this is just internal documentation. And you don't have to send this in to anybody unless you're specifically asked to do so. Okay, this is different than electronic submission, which I'll get to here in a second. But every year, I have employers reaching out to me asking, what is this letter I just got in the mail? What is this email I just got regarding my log and summary? It's from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS, and you are randomly selected. You're not in trouble. They're not going to do an investigation. They're just building a database for certain types of injuries, illnesses that happen with certain trades in certain areas of the world. So that's all you need to do is submit, upload those documents, scan them and upload them to the BLS or send them in to the BLS. And I would say over the last 3 years, they're giving you 12 months. And so that you'd be getting that email or snail mail. Most of it's email now, but every now and then I see them sending out a letter in the mail requesting you to send this stuff in. Um, and it's for next year. So it's for the calendar year 2026. The documentation that's due next February is what they're asking you to be ready for. So you are required to do so if that's the case. This is different from electronic submission, and I apologize for this slide being wordy, but again, you'll have a copy of this presentation so you can go back on this. But remember how we said the minimum threshold limit to maintain documentation is 10 or more? Electronic reporting, if you average 20 or more employees, so the minimum threshold being 20, you have to send in data from your completed summary. So once this is complete and you're ready to post it on the wall, you have everything you need to go to this website, the injury tracking application through the OSHA portal, and submit data. You don't have to upload any documents. You just have to submit numbers that are already on this page right here. Okay. If you're over 100 employees, if you averaged over 100, and this is all employees, this isn't just field staff, it's everybody that's in the organization, 100 or more, you have to do the OSHA summary as well as the log and any incident report that is a loggable incident. And we'll get into what is and what is not a loggable incident here in a second. But if you're over 100, you have to submit data from all three of those documents, your Form 301, which is your incident report, your log, and your summary. So again, to recap, 20 or more, you have to do data just from your summary. If you're 100 or more, you have to submit data, but what I mean by that is you don't have to upload documents. You have to just type in, you're answering questions based on the documentation you have in front of you while you're working on the computer. So you don't have to scan anything. You just have to enter data from your completed documentation through this injury tracking application. The deadline for this is March 2nd. Okay. So my strong recommendation is if you're done with this page and you're ready to stick it on your wall, that is required by February 1st, I recommend you just go to the injury tracking application and get this done because you have everything you need. And I've leaned over the shoulder of multiple employers and watched them do this, and it takes 5-6 minutes. It's very, very short drainage on your time. It doesn't take long, especially if you've already done it in the past and you already have an account set up. But all it is just answering questions based on what you see on the left side of this document, as well as the employment information. They're going to ask you, how many employees did you average last year? What were your hours? And then, total number of cases with days away from work, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So it is fairly simple. Okay. But this is due by March 2nd. Okay. So now let's talk about what is and what is not a recordable. So basically how to fill out your log. This is OSHA's 5-step process. This isn't mine, but it is fairly self-explanatory. Step 1, did something happen? Did the employee suffer an injury or illness? Step 2, was it work related? And there is a lot of gray area here. I don't want to jump down that rabbit hole, but please, if you feel like you have an exception to work relatedness, please let me know. Or call me and ask me, and I will get you the right answer. The first thing I want to get across is that when it comes to what is and what is not a recordable is the potential allowance in lineage of a workers' compensation claim. And when we're talking about OSHA 300 documentation, those are separate, okay? An L&I claim is simply insurance. If you boil it down to its simplest terms, it is a licensed healthcare professional being reimbursed for their products and services. Somebody goes to the clinic, they get their eye flushed out with saline, and somebody took care of them, put a patch over it, that person or that entity, that clinic is being reimbursed for their services and those products that they pulled out of the cabinet, the gauze pads, the saline solution, et cetera, et cetera. That's all a claim is. Okay. That's it. It's a workers' compensation insurance to reimburse licensed healthcare professionals. Your OSHA documentation is simply a log of certain categorized illnesses, and we'll get into that in a second, but that's all that is. So, with that being said, there are times when we look into what is happening on the claim side to answer questions regarding the recordable, regarding the OSHA documentation. And that comes into play when we talk about work relatedness. For example, if the claims, I get this question 2 or 3 times every year. I don't know whether to put this on my log, but the claim wasn't allowed. They didn't allow the claim. Well, if they didn't allow the claim, they didn't allow it because they deemed it was not work related. So if the claim's not allowed, you cannot have a recordable. Okay. If the claim was denied, then you do not have a recordable because they're saying that it wasn't work related. Okay. So if it's work related, step 3, is the injury or illness a new case? And again, a little bit of gray area here. And this is where, again, I would defer back to what's going on the claim side of things. Did they file a new claim? Is there a new claim number? If there is a new claim number, then, and again, you meet this criteria, then you would have a new recordable, even if it's to the same body part. Generally speaking, though, that doesn't come up very often if it's the same body part that's re-injured. If, depending on the length of time, they might put that under the old claim. They might file a new claim or open a new claim, depending on that circumstances, whether or not you have to record a new incident on your log. Step 4, is the injury or illness serious enough according to the general recording criteria? And that's where we'll spend some time is defining what is the general recording criteria. Okay. If it does, if it meets the requirements, then we put it on our log. Okay. All right. So this is the general recording criteria. And some of these slides, you're going to see things that I've highlighted and put in red. Those are things that we typically see in construction-related injuries. Okay, so these are ones to pay particular attention to. So general recording criteria, these are the do's. These are the things that we do put on our log regardless. These are criteria that say, yes, this is a loggable incident. First one we don't talk about. Next one, loss of consciousness for any length of time. Okay, here's an example, potential example of having a recordable and not having a claim. Okay, let's say someone passes out due to heat exhaustion or heat stress. Okay, you get them out of their hot clothing, you hydrate them, you might even send them home for the day. That is technically speaking a recordable because they lost consciousness. They might deny or choose not to go to the doctor. You can encourage them to, and they say, I don't want to go. I think I'm fine. I got overheated and I'm fine now. Well, there's an example of having to put, the rule, OSHA's rule says you need to put this on your log. If they lose consciousness for any length of time, you got to log that incident. But you may not have a visit to the doctor. Okay. So that's where you could have a recordable and not actually have a claim. Next one we see frequently, restricted work activity or job transfer. This is their fancy term for light duty. If because of my injury, my work-related injury, I have to alter my functions physically, change the tasks that I do based on my normal job description, if I have to change my job duty to lighter functions, less physically demanding functions, that is a recordable, even if I'm back to work the next day. Okay. Next one, self-explanatory. Any days missed from work. Okay. Does not include vacation time. It does not include KOS. I mean, KOS doesn't count. What I mean by that is KOS, keep on salary. It's something that we do to manage the costs of a claim. Okay. ABC's requirement as of right now is that you must do at least 6 weeks of keep on salary because that keeps your claim costs down and your EMR, experience modification rate, and your insurance costs, so to speak. So KOS doesn't have any bearing on whether they miss work or not. If they're not at work, regardless of KOS or not, that is a recordable event. Now, if they choose to not be at work, meaning I choose to take vacation as opposed to go on light duty. I am only going to miss Friday. I'll be back to work on Monday. I'm going to take a vacation day. That doesn't count. That is not a recordable. If they voluntarily remove themselves from employment, either through vacation or no call, no show, that does not count as recordable. But if they're being KOS'd, time loss, whatever, yes, that is recordable. Okay. Medical treatment beyond first aid, which we will define here in a couple slides, what first aid is and is not, or any other significant work-related injury or illness that is diagnosed by a licensed healthcare professional. Things like chronic irreversible disease, cancer, fractured cracked bone. That's one we see a lot in construction. If I have a fractured or cracked bone, that is a recordable. Punctured eardrum. Okay. These are also some one-offs. We see these not frequently, but they do pop up every now and then. Needle stick. Construction sites, for whatever reason, are very attractive to addicts. They're not well secured, well lit, technically speaking. Well, not say comparatively speaking, not super well lit or secure. So somebody grabs a bag of garbage that has paraphernalia in it and they stick themselves with a needle. That is a recordable event. Uh, Tuberculosis infection, as evidenced by a positive skin test, or again, diagnosed by a licensed healthcare professional. Employees' hearing loss. I have a couple of companies that are in our ABC group that do a lot of sandblasting, and they have to have monthly hearing exams. And if they have any change in hearing compared to their baseline audiogram, that is a recordable incident. They've lost some hearing based on their work environment, so they have to put that on their log. Okay, so those are all the do's. These are the don'ts. Okay. So these last two slides, when you get your slide deck, refer back to these. Okay. These are the ones that automatically go on your log. These, in and of themselves, in a bubble, are not in of a recordable. So visits to a doctor or healthcare professional solely for counseling or observation. Okay. Here's an example of potentially having a claim, for sure having a claim and not having a recordable. Let's say I witnessed something. My friend got hurt really bad, and I need to go talk through that with psychiatric or psychological assistance. Okay, that is a claim, and that is a licensed healthcare professional being reimbursed for their services, not a recordable. Okay, diagnostic procedures in and of themselves are not recordable. I can get an MRI, CAT scan, X-ray, et cetera, et cetera. That procedure in and of itself, even if I go to the hospital, not admitted, I go to the hospital and I get that procedure, not a recordable. Now, if it comes back and I have that fractured or cracked bone, then I know I have a recordable, but the procedure, the diagnostic procedure in and of itself is not a recordable. Or any procedure that can be labeled as first aid. So these next two slides are first aid in and of themselves, not recordable. You're going to see a couple highlights here, though. Non-prescription medications at non-prescription strength, not recordable. Okay. Also, whatever is given at the clinic doesn't count. I mean prescription, meaning I get a piece of paper that have to go fill at Rite Aid, Walgreens, whatever. That is a recordable. Now, that prescription does not have to only be oral medication. It can be topical, antibiotic ointment, antibiotic eye wash, or it can be therapeutic. Okay. If I am prescribed massage therapy, that is recordable. So prescription and whether that prescription's filled or not makes it recordable. So just remember, a prescription equals a recordable. Okay. But non-prescription meds at non-prescription strength, NSAIDs, leave, naproxen, which, ibuprofen, Advil, Tylenol, acetaminophen, all those not recordable at non-prescription strength. Administering tetanus immunizations, cleaning, flushing, or soaking wounds on the skin surface, all considered first aid, all not recordable. Here's another one we see a lot. Using wound coverings such as Band-Aids, gauze pads, or butterfly bandages. Those are considered first aid and not recordable. The minute I close a suture with a stitch, staple, or medical glue, i.e. Dermabond, that is a recordable. Okay, stitches, yes. Gauze pads, butterfly bandages, no. Dermabond, medical glue is a yes. That goes on my log. Okay. Using hot or cold therapy, not recordable. Using any totally non-rigid means of support. Using temporary immobilization devices, all considered first aid and all do not go on your log. Drilling a fingernail or toenail to relieve pressure, drain fluids using eye patches. Here's one we see now and again. Using simple irrigation or a cotton swab to remove foreign bodies not embedded in or adhered to the eye. So they differentiated this one and the next one. If you look, I can use tweezers on other areas other than my eye. What I mean by that is that I can flush my eye. I can take a cotton swab to remove something. As soon as I take a pair of tweezers, and in the medical report, it'll say watchmaker forceps. As soon as I take a pair of tweezers to remove something not embedded in or adhered to my eye, that is a recordable. Now, more oftentimes than not, when I do that as a procedure, as a licensed healthcare professional, I do that, I'm going to prescribe antibiotic ointment to prevent infection. And if you go back, that that's covered in that prescription medication slide or bullet point. So it's not doesn't happen very often to where I see a doctor in the medical report when I'm helping one of our members figure out whether they have a recordable or not. Doesn't happen very often where I see them remove something and then not prescribe something after that. But the rule says if I use tweezers to the eye, it's a recordable. Now, the next one, I can use irrigation tweezers, cotton swab, or other simple means to remove splinters or foreign material from areas other than the eye. So I can use tweezers on my forearm, my leg, my elbow, what have you, and it's still considered first aid treatment. Okay. Finger guards, massages, drinking fluids to relieve heat stress, all considered first aid treatment, all not recordable. Restricted work, light duty or modified work does not only, it is a recordable not only if it comes from a healthcare professional, but it also comes from you, the employer. Okay. Meaning you're just doing the right thing and keeping an employee from, you know that they've been going through some physically demanding work and their body is tired, and you decide to keep them in the shop for a couple days and change, do light duty for them voluntarily. Let me just put the term on here, technically speaking, that is a recordable. Okay.